for joining us. We'll go ahead and get started. The gentleman on my left here, Michael Greenberg, is the head of AI strategy for LA's one and only Snap.
Thank you.
And has done many, many things for many years in AI, and we're going to tap into some of that here. I'm Dave Cole. I'm a longtime cybersecurity veteran. My company, OpenRaven, was acquired by Formstack last year. And we were very fortunate to have Michael as our AI advisor as a company through PSG. And what we wanted to do with this conversation really was take the dialogue that Michael and I have when I can creep into his schedule and pull that out here in just sort of a candid AI dialogue of people building two very different things. On our side, it's a business automation platform for citizen developers at Formstack. We just announced our Streamline product today. Michael's been with us from the very beginning as we build AI into the heart of that. And Michael, of course, has all things Snap, from Snap Spectacles to all the magic that happens inside the platform otherwise. Yeah. What did I miss, Michael?
No, I mean, that's great. I think the only thing I would add is I've been at the Monty quite a few times, and I think in the past it was in two turns I had as a founder myself in enterprise SaaS. And so I think a lot of what was interesting to me moving to Snap over the last couple of years is frankly the lessons learned from consumer that I kind of ignored when I was in the enterprise space. And I think specifically with this moment we're going through and this kind of AI moment, as it were, looking at what's working across 850 million MAU is helpful. And I think there are certain things that we've learned from early adoption that hopefully will be valuable today.
Yeah, having worked, I did Norton for half a decade, and when you think at that scale of hundreds of millions of users, it's a different world. Coming back to where we are today, one of the things that we've been working through at Formstack a lot as we build the new platform is how much do you do? How much is enough to not get disrupted? There's these decisions where, for example, for us, we believe the future is voice-driven, invisible, seamless workflow. But yet, we also work with educational institutions, healthcare. There's still a lot of fax machines and paper out there. And to a certain degree, you can make yourself believe that they're going to leap forward from fax machines straight to agentic AI and voice-driven workflow, and then you use Apple Intelligence, and you think, maybe it's a few years off. Maybe we're not quite there yet. Yeah. So doing enough to kind of bridge your users and meet them where they are today but not get disrupted has been a lot of our pain points, the fun decisions, the tough design decisions. How do you think about that as a veteran of AI and at Snap?
Yeah, so I'll actually start with a story of how I did disrupt myself. And a company that I had right before joining Snap was called Retina. And Retina, based out of LA, we predicted customer lifetime value at or before first purchase. When we put the company together, it was 2017. And so at that time, machine learning was hard. And data scientists were expensive. And we thought in the company that by having a brilliant team assembled from places like Meta, that would be enough. We would basically be able to do machine learning on behalf of other businesses that would have a difficult time with it in the middle market and lower Fortune 5000. The big lesson I learned was if there's a problem in the market, especially as you all know this, the market arbitrages it immediately. And so the problem here was machine learning was going to stay tough. There was going to be a continued talent dislocation. It'd be hard to deploy models. What ended up actually happening was machine learning became easy. The price and ability of talent to do it dropped. Software engineers basically started using new tools so they could deploy it. And what ended up happening to us, we thought that this model that was going to be our moat actually just came out of the box with every other competitor. So if you already had a pre-existing install base, you were Klaviyo, or you were Shopify, my CLV score, even if it was a couple percentage points better, if the other one was free and it came out of a pre-existing system, you can imagine my sales team wasn't very happy. So that was a huge lesson. Well, I think we're seeing that lesson now with AI today. When I first joined Snap, the first bet I had to make, and I'm not trying to, again, this is me not patting myself on the back, I learned it the hard way, but was that the APIs would commodify. That this commodification layer was going to happen painfully and quickly. And so we started on GPT 3.5 for My AI, which is our internal chatbot, quickly became, I think, the third largest LLM surface on the planet at that time. This is Q1 2023, so just a month or two after OpenAI launched ChatGPT. And it was expensive. I can't tell you how much it was, but what I can tell you is that by the next year, we'd grown quite a bit, but the price had dropped almost in half. And then the year after that, taking us to present day, it dropped again by about 90%, and the intelligence got higher. So we started at a 3.5 level. Now we're at a 4 level intelligence. And for those who don't play a lot with these models, you can think of it as similar to a Snap user. It graduated from high school to college. And so I think the takeaway here is the API business, not a good business, unless you own the compute layer underneath. But what's the other side of this? Well, consumer business is very good, and we'll get into sort of what you need to do on the enterprise side, but the cost of serving is basically getting extremely cheap. And I think for us at Snap, the big takeaway has been the APIs are going to be ubiquitous, and they're going to be, getting close to free. We actually already run models on Edge now. So we run and have shipped image models that now are on late-stage iPhones. We need to think about what are we going to build that's different from everybody else. And this goes to your second question of how do you disrupt yourself and ship some new product but not alienate your current user base. Yep. Our users, look, Snap opens up to the camera. That's the Snap part of it. And then people are constantly talking to each other directly. That's the chat part of it, right? What you didn't hear me say is we're living in a world of just constant content consumption. So if you think about, I'm not going to pick on them too much, but like Meta has a chatbot, but that chatbot sits kind of inorganically in different parts of their application. We try to ride pre-existing user behaviors. Our chatbot helps when you open the camera to basically say what you're seeing through that portal, or to give you a descriptor on an image, which can then help with shopping. It can help with identification of different items. Same thing on the chat side. People who want homework help. It's one of our biggest use cases. Or how to ask somebody out to prom, which would have been very helpful for me as a physics major. Those are the things that we're building in and trying to live where our users are. What you didn't hear me say was we're building some sort of huge enterprise tool like deep research or something like that, right? We know not to go in that direction and kind of ride pre-existing user behavior. So that's, I guess, that was a long-winded way of answering the question.
What about the use case of like a stability AI?
Yeah. So stability, who knows stability or has heard of it? They do image models, okay? And that's very telling because they were the hottest company potentially in AI other than OpenAI in 2023. But what they did was they launched image models. It was called Stable Diffusion at scale, and they open sourced it. And the problem here was it was tough to build a business model off of that. And there were many other image models that came into market soon thereafter. And so back to my point on API collapse, these models commodified very quickly. So I won't kind of kick stability, but they've gone through some trials and tribulations. Meanwhile, OpenAI has kind of dodged this bullet. And I would argue they dodged it in a way that people are only fully starting to appreciate. So they have an API business and they sell at a platform level, but they also have a huge consumer business. They just reached 400 million monthly active users. Now, if you think about what's going on, and I have to be careful here to tiptoe through NDAs, but because we're a big customer of theirs, but if you think about what's going on there, the API business is becoming more and more of a dogfight, right? Google has Gemini. They're pricing one of their models, Flash, at a level that's so cheap, it's sometimes cheaper than running a Llama model on your own server, right? And then on the flip side, they have this amazing new community on consumer. So the cost of serving their consumer side is going down. Their margins are increasing there, but on the API side, things are getting squeezed. So I think what you're going to see is OpenAI is going to try to be the Apple of this moment. I actually think they're going to try to get to about 1 billion MAU by the end of the year. That's their stated goal publicly. But I think the bigger goal is to morph into the first native consumer heavyweight of this particular era. And I think the Apple Intelligence issue and slow start really shows you how hard it is to get there and that they've got something special there. So that would be the answer.
Yeah, let's go back to founder Michael. So those are the implications, the things you see from your vantage point today, which
Yep.
is you see far and deep and wide. But if you were to start, what does all this mean if you were to start a company today? Like, let's say we go back and were to restart over again and found a new company. What does AI mean for the composition of the team, the capital requirements? Like, what would you do if you were to start a company next week versus when you started Retina?
Yeah, I play much harder to get at the Monty conference because we desperately needed capital in 2017. And so I think if I compare it to that moment in the machine learning era, here are a couple things that have changed. Number one, part of what constituted a good seed stage bet at that time was how smart your technical team was. That was sort of the big signal effect because you didn't have any traction, right, pre-seed. And so we had a really brilliant team, and that team, in a sense, constituted and underwrote the investment. Today, especially in enterprise SaaS, I do the opposite. I think the cost of delivering an MVP has gone really far down. I would want to look at, do they have a founder that's huge in this space and highly influential? Do they already have the ability to get their first 20 customers because of that network effect of that founder?
Domain knowledge.
That domain knowledge, expertise, and reputation. Yeah. That reputation is huge. I think that what Gen AI has done is it's removed that signal effect and moat of the deeper technical team for like enterprise vertical SaaS and shifted things over to the thing that kind of was almost secondary oftentimes, I think, in our diligence, which was, what is that founder who's going to do the selling? What's the founder that actually has reputation? Look, we're seeing the same thing on the consumer side. For everybody who is talking about the democratization of creativity and intelligence, that's great, but that's going to create a ton of white noise. If I can do something that a person who has 20 years of experience in Adobe Photoshop can do, that just means we're all spraying the market with new creative things. Same thing's happening in music, other stuff. So who wins in that? Well, Taylor Swift wins. Somebody who already has a pre-existing IP that they can project out or a network that they can ride. But getting started and getting out of that white noise is harder and harder in the consumer world. Same thing we're going to see in enterprise. So I would be betting heavily. Second, you're not going to need as much capital. I think VCs are going to, we're already seeing this with like General Atlantic, but you're going to start to see them look more like early stage private equity and introducing credit vehicles, trying to figure out how companies that have less capital intensive requirements can be helped along the way. I think they're going to get leaner themselves. You're going to see smaller and smaller shops.
So almost kind of micro incubators.
Yeah, and they're going to really have to get smart at, it's not enough now to just package cloud credits. That's kind of table stakes. I think they're the ones that are going to win, especially in enterprise SaaS, are the ones that are going to help you bring those advisors to the table. Again, it's the PE playbook.
Yep.
The advisors to the table that help you with your go-to-market, that are going to help you with that reputation and impact in that first 20 customers that you need. I think it's going to be a lot of decisioning that goes around that.
What do you think it means for the funds themselves? I mean, we danced up to some of the implications there, but if people need less capital, yes, they can provide more services.
Yeah.
But what are the other implications?
I mean, look, so on the corp dev side, because I work inside of corp dev and strategy at Snap, we see a lot of this past vintage because they're rotating into places like Snap to hopefully have some soft landings. And I think that outside of the top decile and top quartile, it's getting really messy. And so I think that and there's a couple, I won't call them out in the room, but I have some friends and folks that I've actually raised capital from, they've embodied this. They've rotated out of these larger funds and gotten very tactical. And I think what you're going to see is they're going to have to do more with less. And potentially even the LPs, they're going to have to create new structures with them. I don't know if you're outside of that kind of flight to quality, top 10 or top decile, how that's going to play out.
Yeah. So if you're a large fund who's been raising massive rounds.
Yeah, and you're outside of that area, I mean, we're already seeing LPs now care more about getting capital back versus some of the artificial shot clock of IRR. I'm sure I'm going to get swamped outside, by the way, on that one, so I'm not trying to throw any darts anywhere, but look, the companies you invest in, you need to start resembling them in capital efficiency, in scale, in size. Yeah.
So founders, we prize domain expertise. networks, ability to run your own go-to-market quickly, proven ability, where you're looking for bootstrapped, most likely, initially, and much smaller around smaller teams.
Yep. And I mean, think about like, for me to pull my first MLEs out of, Fang back in 2017, I had to raise money to play that really goofy game of, paying $300,000 salaries for a pre-revenue company and enterprise. That is not necessary anymore. I don't have to play that game.
I mean, we use Cursor extensively, as I'm sure a bunch of people do. And I know that you guys use it as well as GitHub Copilot and other tooling. Some of it is shockingly good, and some of it isn't quite there yet. For example, taking designs from Figma, shooting front-end code out the other side. It'd be lovely if that works. It's not a thing yet. If it's a thing for you, let us know. We'd love to do it. Having said that, how would you reason about even hiring in the future in your tech team? Would you bias more towards senior talent and try and make a 10x, 100x, or would you bias towards cheap, high energy, great tooling?
Yeah, so that's, I mean, look, I think what we're seeing, and until the quote-unquote promise of AGI truly, goes through that phase change and that switch flips, I've still seen that in almost every field, the experts are getting outsized gains with this tooling. So in software engineering, someone who's experienced is getting so much more out of the tooling. I mean, at Snap, we have a very seasoned, relatively mature group, and I think we accept a little over 20% of code commit from these tools like GitHub Copilot. If you're a junior dev, I would argue it gives you this artificial feeling of being better than you are, but you're going to inject, other than boilerplate code, a lot of problems, and you're going to have problems debugging it. So similar to if you're using it for strategic thinking, already being an expert in your field, it's going to help you. Same thing with software engineering. So I would still have someone on the team, in the core team, that's very, very good right now.
So almost an architect surrounded by less experienced folks.
Yeah, and but I do think now you can have much larger stratification. You can have those junior devs around an anchored senior versus in the past, it was kind of like you needed a lot of senior devs and a lot of killers when you were going for a venture-backed startup.
Now more of a combination for benefit of the tooling. It doesn't go away. And you mentioned AGI in there, so let's riff on that for a moment. What does AGI mean to you? And from a builder's perspective, let's say that we're at the moment where it's arrived per your definition. What does it mean? What does it change?
I mean, look, so this is where I will dance through that NDA. But what I will say is I like to use the definition that I think a lot of the players that are using that term use, which is imagine a Zoom meeting, and you have a software engineer on the other side, and you have an AGI construct, because it's not going to be just one model, but most likely a constellation of models and services. Would you be able to tell the difference? That's kind of the new Turing test. So AGI would appear, by my definition, when that sort of mid-level software dev is pretty much indistinguishable as a remote worker from someone else. I will give you the public information. Publicly, Anthropic is stating they think they'll get there by 2027, by that definition. And publicly, OpenAI has a timeline that's similar but slightly faster. They have a term, I call it the Diet Coke of AGI, but AGI Lite, which you can think of it as a subset of what those software devs would do, being fully automated. They're thinking that could be way sooner. I can't give you the exact date. So how do I think about it? I'm excited. I'm excited because I think from an AI assistant standpoint, what this really just means is we're going to start to see assistance as a table stake mechanism. It's going to have to actually do actions on our behalf. So, who's played with OpenAI's operator? Okay, I know who's now paying for a lot of money for your ChatGPT access. It's not great. It helped me be a better son to my mother by getting gifts on time and remembering certain things. But it still is a very inefficient process. I think by the end of the year, you're going to see that these things like Operator, which basically can go and book reservations for you, by reading, by the way, the mobile web, not by having a maintaining APIs, but actually just going out and surfing the web the way you do, I think it's going to be really, really looking good by the end of the year. Which means in enterprise, there's going to be that expectation. Anybody who's your end user, who's using things like this, coming out of box from Google, coming out of box from OpenAI, they're not going to want a chatbot inside of your SaaS platform. They're also going to start having expectations that it's moved from insight to action. And I think that's where the machine learning paradigm failed. We never got past insight in the machine learning world the way we wanted to. I could predict customer lifetime value, but I still had to hand it over to a marketing team to use that input to go optimize their spend, right? So I think we're going to start to see these loops close in the next year or two, starting with consumer, but you're going to start to see it also with vertical SaaS, like in legal with Harvey, things like that.
Yeah, sort of a progression, not unlike mobile, where we all got apps, and then
Yep.
all of a sudden, the apps started with Facebook, with conventional consumer applications, and then quickly it was your bank, it was your insurance company, and so forth. So when we fast forward to that place of AGI, when it's so easy to create software that we prize domain expertise and bootstrapping over everything else, how do you create defensible IP if you don't have super smart people cranking code that other people can't figure out? Of course, there's the data moat, but you have to get there. You got to get there. And Taylor Swift wasn't born Taylor Swift.
No.
It took a while to get there. How do you get there? What is creating defensible intellectual property look like in that world?
So this is the thing, and I think for anybody who was at the Monty conference last year, I don't know how many speakers who were heads of major labs were saying, scaling laws are going to hold, and data's your moat, and compute's your moat, and all that. And I'm not here to throw shade, but obviously that's not true. Now, that's been shown to not be true. For those who followed the DeepSeek, situation, you now have, it used to be Meta was the gadfly of the West, where they were willing to spend tons of money subsidized by their mainline business to open source these models roughly 3 to 6 months behind state of the art and really drive costs down. Now you have an entire nation state actor willing to do that and willing to make it full open source for the West. So you've seen a fast accelerationism and that sort of API thing I talked about. That's not your moat. But the secret to what your moat is actually, in my opinion, and I'll make the case, is what OpenAI did in return. So for anybody who's a power user of ChatGPT, one of the things I think you start to inherently pick up on is it starts to adapt to your needs. So your personal data, your personal proclivities that you're giving to it over time, they've built in really world-class personalization and memory capabilities. So in a sense, you're tuning it against yourself and what you want, so that when you then step out of it and go try another product like Claude or Gemini, many people I know, especially for personal use, go, ugh, this isn't, they don't even know how to put a finger on it, but it's kind of like the Coke versus Pepsi challenge. They're just going, oh, this doesn't feel like what I like. It doesn't remember what matters to me, things like that. And that switching cost is very real in consumer. But yet when I talk to enterprise SaaS companies, all the time they're like, here's this new feature we're pushing that frankly might be subsumed by the next model that's pushed out. I rarely see them think about things in a sort of longitudinal way. What is the value prop of some power user of my tool, Formstack, whatever, if they're using it over 6 months? How will it adapt to them so that if I went to any other competitor, it's going to feel really bad? Nobody I know. It doesn't mean they're not doing it. No one's talking about that. What they're saying is, here's a new feature or widget. They're still thinking in SaaS land. Because I know this is weird, but they kind of still think of their tools as something people just kind of have to use. Not this new thing you're building a kind of quasi-relationship with. And that's what's interesting here. And I think in enterprise SaaS, they should learn from what's happening with OpenAI and how they're staving off mass commodification through personalization and these feedback loops. And those loops matter. There's a reason why Google DeepMind moved the entire Gemini product under them. They're desperate to get more consumers there, right, to generate those personalization feedback loops, because that's differentiation.
So let's turn it on Snap for a moment here.
Okay.
Clearly, Meta has a different view of this
Yep.
with Llama than Snap does.
Yep.
One of your big projects has been Spectacles. How does hardware play into the future here? And we've seen some wearable kind of missteps here. Things
Oh,
that
yeah.
look big,
Yeah.
didn't work out, friend, humane, so forth.
Yeah.
B seems to be doing a little better.
Yeah.
And y'all have the Spectacles project.
Yep.
How do you see hardware playing in this too? Is that potentially hardware expertise a potential defensible moat? And does Apple have an amazing strategy after all here?
Yeah, well, so this is a tough one because that whole thing of hardware is hard, right? That is true to a degree, but I think in the fullness of time, hardware is also a commodity, right, at the end of the day. So the way we think about it is, one, we believe that the world will be layered in compute. You know, the mobile computing paradigm basically allowed people to bring compute with them, but it's still very much locked within that surface. In the future, we think that compute kind of gets unleashed on everything, and AR is something that Snap has, been in from the beginning. So this computing paradigm means you're getting more information in, and you're projecting more information out, which means I think some of the old rules still hold. So the way we're thinking about specs is less of a specs is the moat in and of itself, and more, we think it's going to be an important platform where we have some ideas on what we're building on top of it to build new experiences that are personalized, that matter to you, similar to how Snap lives in that mobile paradigm.
And the phone has been so predominant. We all have black rectangles.
Yep.
Does this mean in the future we probably still have our black rectangle, but
Yep.
its place is kind of subjugated to a myriad of other devices, whether it's pins, spectacles, watch, you name it. How do you reason about that?
So when I was an executive at AWS, one of the big takeaways I got from my work there is a principle Jeff Bezos said, which is he doesn't base all of his strategies on what he thinks will change, but what he thinks will not change in the future. And so what I don't think will change going forward in this is people are going to want to make decisions frictionlessly, want to do things effortlessly, and want to engage with the world in kind of a fast and fun way. I don't think that's changing. And mobile really shifted us into that paradigm in a hard way. So what that means is, yeah, when you start thinking about a constellation of wearables around you, if the total sum of it means I'm not reaching into my pocket and having to look at this all the time, I'm able to quickly get and interact with things faster, then the phone's position will just be sort of truncated towards however it serves that best. But I think these other wearables we're already seeing, like voice as a paradigm, with our own Snap users, people are defaulting into voice or actually talking with pictures first with My AI more than you would expect. Wearables will play right into that. So I think Apple, obviously, in their ecosystem play is interesting, and we're obviously thinking about that as well.
All right, now, without betraying any NDAs, I think we're just about at time here, but we'll ask you one more thing, which is kind of project out over the next 6 to 12 months, end of 2025. I think that's anything more than that almost feels too far.
Yeah, for sure.
So what are the non-obvious things? As you look ahead, what are the things that you see unfolding throughout the rest of the year?
Yeah. Well, first thing I will say is the timelines for things being released are about to radically move up.
And is that DeepSeek?
Yeah, DeepSeek forced everybody's hand. So a good paradigm to think about closed source models is big pharma, but without government protection. So they have these models, and until an open source variant comes online, they have a period of time where they're differentiated by their capabilities, and they want to maximize their monetization of that. Well, like I said, it was roughly a 3 to 6 month window that those closed source models were ahead of open source. That has now moved up to about 1 to 2 months with DeepSeek, and frankly, with just the entire Chinese arrival to this particular party. So what does that mean? They're going to have to move up these timelines. A lot of these models that haven't been released have already been baked, but they were being held off so that you could have a longer monetization window. So that's one. I don't think people realize the accelerationism that's about to happen there. And then two, I think that a lot of the value is going to be coming from the frameworks to stitch these things together. So I think people, if you're just thinking the models themselves are going to get so much better, and we're going to keep having these big step function feelings of, this model's just emergent properties are better at the API layer, that's not what you're going to see. A lot of the magic's actually going to come from two areas. Number one, how do you stitch them together to create these automated tasks? That's really what an agent will be, and you're going to see massive acceleration there. And two, GPT 4.5 was just announced. And a lot of people thought it wasn't that great. considering that it didn't on benchmarks score as well as people were hoping. Here's my thing to tell you about that. Be careful about misunderstanding what these jumps mean on GPT models. Think of a 3.5 to 4 was a big jump, and 4 to 4.5 didn't feel big. But these models, like the O models, test time models, here's the difference. They take those base models and then have them think a long period of time. So if you have someone who's kind of smart thinking for an hour versus someone who's a little bit smarter thinking for an hour, that delta is going to look very big. And so the 4.5 model, even though it's only marginally better, once they build the O variant of that, you're going to see it have a much bigger pop. And so there's still a little bit more juice this year, and people are going to be pretty surprised by those test time models.
And just kind of tying the threads together, they've made a big case about it being more human. And if your strategy is personalization on the consumer side, creating a retention moat, it's got a lot more than meets the eye, a lot more than's measured in benchmarks.
Absolutely. The vibe check. Anyway.
All right.